Hey beautiful people, it's me Daryl and I'm back with another video. Today's video will be my July reading wrap up and I have loads to talk about. So this is the stack of the books that I read in the month of July and yeah, that is 11 books. So I got a lot to say this time. Now I'm gonna try to make these reviews a little bit shorter and whatever because I don't want this video to be long and forever. I was looking up into like trying to do editing and stuff like that at a certain point and I realized I can't really do that with this. I don't want to get into that story, but anyway, so it's gonna have to be one long thing. And hopefully I'm able to get my ideas across. For one particular book, I know that I'm gonna have to like read something off the computer, so that's gonna happen. But yeah, so it was a great reading month. It was a great reading month. So out of these 11 books, I can't remember how many I gave 5 stars, but I gave quite a few. No book dipped under 4 stars. That's how much I was really feeling them. I think it was an excellent month. I have been trying to like read, you know, whatever I feel like reading, not necessarily what I think is going to trend on Instagram or on BookTube. And also, well, now I'm doing that because I'm going to be in the midst of like Booker season. But like at this point, all of these books were just books like, you know, I just felt like I wanted to read them. Whether they're hype or not, doesn't really matter. So how about we get started? So the first one is Certain American States by Catherine Lacey. This is the one that I'm gonna have to read off the computer or something. I love this collection. Okay, that's wrong. I didn't love this collection, I liked it. I mentioned before that Catherine Lacey is my favorite contemporary writer besides like Marlon James. I've come to actually realize that I think she's my 3rd favorite writer like ever. I just love her work. So for me, this isn't a disappointment because I really did like it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a solid collection. But you know, it isn't at the heights of like Pew, for example. But that doesn't really matter. This author, to me, she's always surprising me and it's just like, I'm just totally in love. So this collection, to me, I would say that all of the stories, the link that they have with them is that they all deal with loneliness and alienation. All of these characters are lonely in their own different, unique ways and sort of looking for like a way out of that alienation, but finding it very difficult. And some of them come up with like either some comical or pretty tragic, well, when I say tragic, like not super dark or anything like that, but kind of tragic as in, oh, that's like really sad that you had to do that to try to get out of their situation of loneliness. So I want to read something that I wrote in my Goodreads, because in my Goodreads I mentioned like 3 of the stories that I really enjoyed, and I'm not going to remember that off the top of my head, I just can't. And I might explain like a little bit more about like what made this collection special. So I'm going to read it off of my computer. So I said, like, I'll be blunt, there are only 3 truly outstanding stories out of 12, but they're great enough to bump this collection up to 4 stars. So the first story I'm going to mention is Please Take, is about a wife mourning her husband, but also follows her encounter with a stranger who she finds wearing one of the donated shirts of her husband. This story goes into wild directions. This is the first moment in the collection that had me reeling. Yeah, like, it was so interesting, this, like, seeing, like, this woman going through grief for her husband, but in such a strange way. And then, I don't want to say, like, plot twist, but in a way, the resolution of that was, like, it had me reeling. I was just like, oh my God, no, you didn't just do that. Small Differences is about a woman who impulsively accepts to house sit for a friend and is secretly thrilled that her friend is broken. Yeah, this had like a kind of acidic tone to it. Really, really comical, but like in a like really cynical millennial, I guess you could say, type of tone where it's just like taking no crap and just like, I don't know, in a way sort of bitter at times. And Small Differences is, and Family Physics follows an extended timeline of a woman who can't help driving her family crazy. It kind of spins the outsider loners trope on its head and is a worthy addition to dysfunctional family fiction. But the kicker is that there's nothing really all that dysfunctional with the family. It's all really her. I think this was my fave of the bunch, the second to last story in the collection, and truth be told, I found myself cracking up. Yeah, this had similar themes with the first story that I mentioned as well, where you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's so interesting the way that you try to like come up with ways to try to get out of your loneliness. And I'd say the common thread between all 12 stories is loneliness and alienation. All the main characters feel emotionally distant from what life and love has served them. They're all finding ways to play hide and seek from their real lives. Everyone is anxiously looking for the emergency exit, even if it happens to be temporary. Yeah, Catherine Lacey is just really, really good. She's really good at like very compelling characters, very strange situations where you feel for them, and sometimes you feel like a bit distant from them as well because you can't like recognize yourself in them, but then the themes just like hit so hard that you're like, yep, that is a raw theme that I just recognize, that we all just recognize. And I just love Catherine Lacey for that. I just feel she is like top of her game. She knows what she's doing and she is very unique about it. So, but yeah, so again, so that's Certain American States by Catherine Lacey. Read it, please. So the next one I want to talk about is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Oh my God, I love this. I love this. This is a gorgeous piece of writing. I went through an entire lit major degree without reading Edith Wharton, and that is a sin. I don't know like what my teachers, like what my professors were thinking when they did not assign this, because I was totally in love. This was like eating a like decadent bowl of ice cream, although I'm lactose intolerant, so it's a very bad analogy. But yes, I was totally in love with this. I need to read everything Edith Wharton has written, like it's just full stop. So this book is about a man named Newland Archer who it's all about like high society New York, like in the late 1800s. These characters are like all about like decadence and excess, and it's just like all the brand names they know, all the high society people they know, and like all that. And it's like a book of like manners in a way, where it's like this particular class behaves a particular way, they associate with a particular people, they handle themselves in certain ways, and there are these rules and regulations. But the book is written in a kind of dry humor sort of way, and sometimes like just dry in the drama of it all, because you could see like in a way that it's very cynical and sort of poking fun at the society and sort of showing you the hypocrisy of the society. So Newland Archer meets Countess Olenska, and she is like so far from the norm of the society, and he's intrigued by that. And you have these two main characters who seem to sort of be intrigued with the other in what they represent in their society. So with Newland Archer, he's intrigued by Countess Olenska because she goes against like the social norms of this society. And you could see like in ways that he's sort of seen the hypocrisy for himself, and he kind of like reaches out to her because you could see he's intrigued by that, and also I guess a little disillusioned with his own life and his role in this world. And then you have Countess Olenska, who is intrigued by Newland Archer because he sort of represents like all that is proper and normal in the society, and that she has been so far removed, you know, from that. So for her, it's kind of like she does see the greatness, I guess, in like what he represents. It's just so fascinating, and there's so much like dimensions to this story. It's passionate, it's hot, it's sexy, it's like comical as well, but like in a dry way, as I mentioned before. This book just has everything going for it. Like, I absolutely adore this. This is one of my favorite books of the year, hands down. I watched the movie adaptation, the film adaptation by Martin Scorsese, and I loved every minute of it. You watch the movie, read the book, read more Edith Wharton. I don't know what else to say about this, but this was just fantastic from like the start to the finish. And the thing is, when I first started it, I knew I was gonna like it, and I was like drawn into this world, and it's written in such a way too where it's like hard to keep up because there's just so many names and so many like descriptions of the food, the setting, the like, you know, like the table setting and the this and that, and you're just like overwhelmed. But then you realize like in a way that is what it's supposed to do, is just just supposed to be very overwhelmed by this world because it's so far removed from most of our lives that it's just like, this is too much. And you start to see the comedy in just like, oh my God, all these people always have to like keep up with these rules like at all times. It's preposterous. So yeah, Edith Wharton was able to like really like showcase that in such a beautiful, gorgeous way. I absolutely love this. This is just great. So next book I want to talk about is Foster by Claire Keegan. Now, I read Small Things Like These from this author, and I did like it. I did not like wholeheartedly love it like it seems like the whole world has, including my mom, who couldn't like stop talking about it as well. But I really did love it. I really did like it, and I appreciated it. But this is where I'm like, oh my God, you broke my heart in so many pieces. So with this book, you have this young Irish girl who, at the very beginning of the book, her father drops her off by this older married couple, and you realize she's there to stay. The father makes no mention of her like coming back home or when he's gonna come back to get her, and she's just supposed to stay with this family, with this couple. And you realize that, okay, it's like she's almost, I guess, in a way like their adopted daughter. Is it temporary or is it permanent? You'll have to read the book to see. Very, very heartbreaking. I mentioned this before when I was talking about like when I was currently reading this book. This book is all about like what is not being said. It's beautiful, poetic writing, very simplistic as well at times, but it is just brewing with so much emotion, but it's what's going on behind those words, what's going on behind the prose, like, or behind the dialogue that's going on in the book as well. There's a lot that's just not being said, that's not being presented fully on the table for you, and it's for you to interpret what's going on and for you to feel those emotions that are brewing underneath the surface. It's just a perfect book. It's a little tiny little thing. It's 95 pages. I guess you could say it's a novella. I mean, or a longer short story, however you want to classify it. It really is not a huge commitment. Please just give this a read. It's a delightful read. And when I say delightful, I don't mean delightful as in like the subject is like, oh, bouncy and delightful and oh, joyous and stuff. It's not. But it is just such a beautiful story, a very heart-rendering, heartbreaking story. Gorgeous, like I said, in the words, there are images that are in my head. And when you think of it, you're like, how does Keegan do this? Like, she writes it in such a subtle manner, but there are just so many striking images that stay with you. So for me, this was excellent. Hands down a 5 stars read as well. I just love this, and I'm like, okay, I have to seek out more from this author because like now I get it. And even though it's Small Things Like These, I totally understand a lot of the things that I mentioned before. It still didn't like grab me in that way. It didn't enrapture me in that way. And like the response to that book was just so like, oh my God, this is great. Like, this is the best author I've been reading, that I just discovered. And for me now, I'm on that bandwagon. Like, now I feel it with this one. It's just gorgeous. Please give this one a go. Next book we're going to talk about is YELLOWFACE by R.F. Kuang. I might arguably say that this is my favorite read of July. But then I'm like, okay, Age of Innocence is there, and then there's another book that's in this stack that I'm also like, okay, this is there. But this, I was very surprised by how much I love this. I really, I don't know. It's just one of these books where I was like, it sounded very interesting, and I also bought it too because of the hype. And I went into it expecting like, yeah, I'm gonna like it. But like, I didn't expect that this was going to like turn my world. Like, it was amazing. And when I was reading it, and if you all know me, you know that I read like multiple books at the same time. This made me ditch every other book, and I was like, I have to focus on this, and I have to finish this, and I have to finish it as fast as possible. I don't want to like, just soak it in like slowly and whatever. I need to read this as quickly as possible because I'm just in it. So in this book, we have June, who is white. That is relevant. Is white, who her friend, or like frenemy if you want to call her that, Athena, is like Chinese descent, and her friend Athena is like lauded with like, you know, she's basically like a writer celebrity. Okay, she's like getting all the awards or nominated for all the awards, getting like, you know, Netflix deals and all sorts of different stuff. And this writer, June, this white writer, is upset about all that. And in her mind, she believes that Athena is getting all of this attention because of her Chinese descent. Anyway, this is not a spoiler. This is very, like, in the first chapter, and it's also in the synopsis if you've read it. Athena ends up dying in, like, one of the most comical, strange ways. She dies, and she has this manuscript that she had just finished. And she hadn't shown it really to anyone, except like June read it like briefly and stuff. And then June steals this manuscript and then sort of works on it a little bit, because the manuscript is a little bit rough. It's brilliant, but it's a little bit rough. She works on it a bit, and then she publishes it as her own. And then the book just snowballs from there. So the book is talking about like a lot of things, and I feel like in certain ways, I've seen some people who like dislike this book. I mean, and they all have valid reasons for disliking it, fine. But dislike it in two ways. One is that they're taking the book, I think, in a way a little too seriously, like, you know, character growth, character development, and all that. It's not there. And to me, I just believe that this book is a straight up satire. So like, approach it as that. It's supposed to be very exaggerated. In a lot of satires, I mean, not that I'm saying characters don't have growth or that there aren't strong characters, there are, but it's supposed to be like the exaggeration of like these people's mannerisms and behaviors and all sorts of stuff. So that's how I viewed the book in that way, and why I think I just gravitated towards it without like caring too much about like, you know, the character growth and development and all that stuff like I mentioned. But the other thing too is I sort of feel that this has hit people in places that they don't want to admit, because there is a lot of stuff going on in this book that's unpacking things that a lot of us are guilty of either thinking or like, let's just say like, you know, like there's this whole movement of like who can write a story, which, I mean, great, like that, it is valid to have that. But I think it like rubbed people the wrong way, or maybe got under the skin a little bit, because it also sort of showed in a way some of the hypocrisy with that as well. It's just so interesting. It's like a takedown of like the publishing world, which I'm like, honestly, like, girl boss moves, I feel, on her part for like going down that road, considering that you are a writer who works like amongst other writers and who gets their stuff published. So that was a very interesting take. So there was that. There's also the fact that you know, she's talking about like, again, cultural appropriation. Who gets to write a story? Does it matter who writes a story? Is that valid, that certain people are the only ones who are able to write particular stories? There's a whole bunch going on. It's very comedic. It's like razor sharp. There is like a lot of acidity to this book. You're going to be very uncomfortable at times. There's going to be times you really don't want to be in this character's head. There are these microaggressions that are there, like some full-on like racist sort of things too as well, that this character says, but says it in like such a bubbly manner that like, it's like, oh yeah, ha ha ha, that's funny, but really it goes much deeper than that. Yeah, I just thought this was really, really good. But I do want to mention, and I'm going to try to find the link to that video. There was a booktuber that I saw who did not like this book and had valid reasons for not liking it. And it like blew my mind, because I was like, oh my God, I never really thought of it that way. So as much as I love the book, I'm like, you know what? I guess it really could have gone further with the satire, and it could have gone further with some of the themes, like things I just didn't really think about. This booktuber, I can't remember, I don't know what the pronoun is, if her, they, but that booktuber mentioned something like about like, let's just say the hierarchy of like Asian writers, and like where like publishers look to certain Asian countries as like the ones that they want their stories from, and then there are some Asian countries or some Asian heritage that they're not all that keen or interested in, and also very interesting to like the privilege that some Asian authors might have over others, and so things that I guess obviously didn't think about, and that was such a fascinating video. So if I can find it, I will definitely link it below, because it's worth your time, and it really did make me see the book a lot different than my initial reaction. But still, I'm gonna go with what my initial reaction and initial gut was, and this was just such a good time. It kind of like opened my mind, made me really think about stuff, which is what all good satire should do, and it was just so like feisty and just had this tone that had me going the whole time. There's like no rough patches to me in this book. It just kept me going. I was entertained, and I was also like, like when I finished it, like, this is giving me a lot to think about in such a like, you know, neat little fun package. Yeah, so definitely I would say read this book. I gave this 5 stars, easiest 5 stars I could give. Easiest 5 stars probably in this collection. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. So please, if this has been on your radar and you were kind of interested in it a bit, check it out, please, because it's really good. Next one I want to talk about is Open Throat by Henry Hoke. Okay, now Sage, please don't hate me, but I did not give this 5 stars. I gave this 4. I think it's a really solid book, but I am not totally enamored in this. So this has a very cool premise, and I'm gonna say the premise, but then I'm also gonna say something about that premise that sort of, in a way, rubs me the wrong way, because I'm like, I'm not sure. So the premise of this is a queer, it's from the viewpoint of a queer mountain lion. Yes, you heard that right. A queer mountain lion who lives underneath the Hollywood sign and basically like observes people who like come in around the sign, or like, you know, people in LA and all sorts of different things. And you kind of are going to learn about like people's behaviors, people's tendency towards violence, whether violent acts or like violence and just the way they carry themselves. You're gonna see like how human beings don't seem to have a lot of interest in each other. They're more interested in the screens of their cell phone. You're gonna hear topics about like climate change, about just like all sorts of different stuff, about humans' reactions to certain news and all sorts of different things. So it's a very cool premise. But I am going to put this out there and say that I honestly think that this is more of a marketing ploy, the whole queer mountain lion thing. Like, the mountain lion thing is very accurate, but the queer part of that, I can't help but feel that publishers sorta, or publishers / marketing kind of said, we want more people to read this, so let's tack on the queer part, because the queer element of this book is a real stretch. I mean, maybe if you like really dig deep, you can sort of see it there. I'm not saying that it's not there at all, and also in ways I could say that maybe it isn't there. I think you could make an argument for both. But I do feel that that was like a marketing ploy to get like more eyes on this book, because seriously, it could have said like a mountain lion who's blah, 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 and that would be just as accurate or probably more accurate. So I had a bit of an issue with that, because to me, just market the book the way that it is. Like, yes, I know marketing, I'm not like a fool or have my head buried in the sand. Of course, marketing, you need to get more eyes on the book, but like using that label just didn't really ring true for me. But you can let me know if you felt differently about that. So yeah, but ultimately the book was really good. Now I'm gonna also make like a bit of a hot take. I think out of all the books that I read in this month, this might be the least memorable to me. I was in it at the moment. It made a lot of very keen observations, and I feel in a way too that this book could sort of be described as like a Twitter book, or I guess X now, where a lot of the observations are done in these like little bite-sized kind of like witty or like straight to the point, but like to get all eyes on you kind of way, sort of like how Twitter is, like where you have a limited, you know, character count, and you know, so you get straight to the point. So even when you open the book, like if I can see like showing you in a way like, oh my god, I have the cover on backwards, but here, like that's how the style of it is written, and so that reminded me of Twitter in like a lot of ways. Yeah, so for me, I feel like the story is there. It was a very compelling book, but like when I left it, I don't feel it's all that deep. That's number one. It didn't leave the most lasting impression compared to some of these books. I did feel it was a bit forgettable, but it's not like a 4 stars because I was really in it at the moment. And I cannot say this is a bad book because I just don't believe it's a bad book. But I just don't find it has a lasting impression. That's at least just for me. The other thing I'm gonna say in this book though too is that there's a certain point, and this is not a spoiler really, but it's like when the mountain lion encounters a particular human, and that human takes a big space in the book. That also is a part where I found it kind of fell off a little bit for me because it just seemed like that human was so like unrealistic and just was not all that compelling as well either. So having time spent with that human was just kind of like, okay, in a way I see where you're going with this, but like it went on a little too long. That was it, and I just didn't really believe a lot of what that particular human was saying. But again, that's just me. But there, in that section though, there is a part that like there's a dream sequence thing, and that was probably the most vivid thing that I remember from this book and was really interesting. Again, it's not saying anything that like you haven't thought about before, but it was very beautiful in how it was told and how it was written. That dream sequence was just, it was glorious. And that's the thing that I remember the most out of this book, besides like the ending of the book as well. So yeah, but Open Throat, I do recommend that you do give it a read. But like I said, out of all of these books, this is not the one that I'm gonna be like, yeah, read this one, please read this one, because to me, I just don't feel that way, and I'm gonna be very honest about it. But it is a 4-star read, and I guess I'm not crying over it not being on the Booker long list. If it was on the Booker long list, I wouldn't be upset about it too. But it's not my favorite. But then again, like I said though too, I think one of my biggest issues with it, and I don't believe that that's what docked it any star or anything like that, but I just feel like that queer mountain lion element was more a marketing ploy than the reality of what this book had to offer. But please tell me if you think I'm wrong. So that's Open Throat by Henry Hoke. Next one we want to talk about, that I want to talk about, is, oh my god, I can't remember, forgot that. Losing the Plot by Derek Owusu. This was really excellent. This was really excellent. And I would say one of the most challenging books from this stack of books that I have for you. So in this book, we have, I don't know if I would classify it autofiction exactly, but it does have a sort of autofiction vibe, but done in a very different and unique way. So we have Derek Owusu, who is a character in this story, by the way, who his mother, he is trying to like try to envision or remember, or not remember. He's trying to envision like what his mom's life was before he was born, and also like when he was born. But he isn't able to like, you know, he doesn't really fully know his mom. Like they're close enough, but he doesn't really fully know her. But then again, I mean, you could be close to somebody too, and you still will never really fully know them. So he's trying to envision his mom, who like emigrated from Ghana, what her life was like. So he is sort of like making up the stories of like her thoughts and her feelings and her adventures and things like that, that he can't possibly know about or fully know about. So that was very interesting. But the other compelling thing that this book has going for it is that Derek Owusu then also puts in footnotes, and the footnotes is like from his perspective, describing and giving you a little bit more insight into that stuff that he wrote about his mom. So whether it will be like what he thinks she thought, or what he thinks the circumstances were at the moment, or what he thought, or what he was going through at the moment. And I feel in a way it's like, it's a clever book because it's like autofiction about himself, but then also like a story or a novel envisioning his mom's life. But the footnotes also, in a way, is like a coming of age of Derek Owusu, because through those footnotes you also learn about Derek Owusu and how he feels about his growing up, how he feels about himself, how he feels about his mom. It was just really, really fascinating. I feel like I said this book is going to be challenging because it's not the most accessible book. I mean, it's written in language that's very easy to understand, but it still is not the most accessible in how he decided to write this. There is going to be like, it's one of those books that is going to force you to slow down. I don't think that you could just speed through this book. I mean, then again, I'm not everyone, so maybe someone can speed through this book and still get a lot out of it, but I feel like you need to slow yourself down and really take it in. And I feel like this is one of those books that I have to read a second time to really fully grasp and understand like what it was that he was saying in some of it, you know? But this is another book too that has like a lot of vivid imagery, a lot of like really interesting things are being said in here. And like I said, some of it could have gone over my head, and then others, it's just like you marinate in it, you know? And then the epilogue of this book is just, like, it was like mind-blowing to me, because I was just like, it put the whole book in perspective, and I was just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, like, I can't obviously talk about that because I don't want to spoil that experience for you if you decide to pick this up. But yeah, this was really, really fascinating. I never read, I can't remember what the book is that I had first heard about from this author. I didn't read it and I didn't buy it. I was tempted to buy it for so long and I never did. So now I feel like I'm gonna have to, because this really did it for me. Yeah, I definitely say pick this one up. It's fascinating in more, it's fascinating all around, but it's really fascinating in the way that it's written. The way that it's written is just top notch and very different, and I love it for that. Next book I want to talk about is The Guest by Emma Cline. Now, I really enjoyed this. This is another 5 stars. By the way, Losing the Plot was 5 stars as well, if I didn't say that before. The Guest is a 5-star read from me, and I'm pleasantly surprised. I bought this book, like I said, I mentioned before, strictly as a cover buy, because again, like, this is fantastic. I love that like vintage retro-ish type look. So I bought it strictly as a cover buy, but then what kind of pushed it into like, okay, let me read it now, was also like Oscar from my Instagram and threads and stuff. He was like, oh yeah, this book was a vibe and whatever. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna read it sooner rather than later. And yeah, I have to say I really like it. And surprised that I like it, because I did not get on with her short story collection Daddy, nor did I get on with her debut novel The Girls. So with this one, I was like, okay, I bought it strictly for a cover buy and I'm hoping that I'm gonna like it, but I really don't have any high expectations. And it was just amazing. Now this one is about, I don't even know how to really describe this book. It's just about this young woman, I think she's 22, named Alex, who she is living with this older man. I believe his name is Simon. She's living with this older man, Simon. He's rich, he's really rich, and she's like living the life, right? She's living the life. She knows how to sort of like downplay certain aspects of her life that she feels like that Simon wouldn't approve of. So it's like she's just like the dutiful sort of like trophy wife, well, she's not wife, but trophy girlfriend type thing to him, and like sort of the arm candy, and like keeps her thoughts to herself and knows how to play the game. But she makes this error and he throws her out. And from that point on, you get Alex basically she's a grifter. Basically, she's just like drifting from like one place to the next. So she's like, inveigling her way into like people's lives, making some people think that they know her when in fact they don't really know her, but she's like sort of conning them and like getting through into their world, staying at people's houses, staying in like really gross places, like all sorts of different things just to try to get by. Because in her mind, she has this idea that she's gonna get back with Simon. She just needs some time. So during that time, she's just being a grifter. But then there are moments in the book that kind of make you realize like she had been doing that kind of thing like even beforehand. The book is very comical in ways. The thing that I found that was really interesting with this book, and I found it was rather different, because I'm going to use two authors, for example, that, okay, before I get into that, let me mention though too that we have all been self-destructive. I think we all do that, whether we take it to different heights or whatever, but we've all been self-destructive. Whether we said something that we know you shouldn't have said, but we did it anyway, or like let some great opportunity slip through our fingers just because, and like all sorts of stuff. We are self-destructive. That's just what humans are. Well, Alex in this book takes it to a whole new level. And this brings me back to what I was gonna say, is that I'm gonna mention two writers. You know, it's not fair to compare, but I'm just gonna compare in a way because I have a reason for it, is like Ottessa Moshfegh and Melissa Broder. The difference with this book, or this author, like in this case, compared to those two, is I feel like, and I love Melissa Broder, I'm a Melissa Broder fan, but like with Melissa Broder and with Ottessa Moshfegh, when they write their books and the characters are self-destructive, it's like all out self-destructive, like, you know, very like over the top. There's a lot of like over the top material, and we're just like laughing away and cackling and stuff like that because it's just so like outrageous in a way. But with this one, I don't think I've ever really come across a book where you have a self-destructive character to that height that's written, it's written like the things that happen in this book are similar to like Moshfegh or Broder, but written in such a more understated kind of, I don't know, like I almost want to describe like a Paul Thomas Anderson, if you know the film director, kind of way, where it's just like very like laid back kind of feel, even though what you're reading is just so crazy and outrageous, but it's not like amped up like how Moshfegh or Broder would decide to tackle that subject, or how, you know, the direction that they would take it. So yeah, I just thought that was really, really fascinating, because when I was reading this, I was just like envisioning that if someone else was writing this, all of these things that would be happening would be just so much more like Spitfire kind of feel to it, and I didn't feel that this book did that. I was just very, it's not calming, but it almost reminded me of like, you know, walking on the beach, like being at the sea and just seeing like the waves and whatever, and it's like lulling you into this sort of rhythm. Meanwhile, it's just like chaos is just going on, but you're just still lulled by like, you know, by the ocean and the waves and stuff. I don't know. It was just really, really fascinating. I don't know if you just think I just sounded like extremely strange with that kind of description, but that's really how I felt when I was reading this. I was just like, this was just so, I just loved everything about it. Yeah, so Alex, the whole time I was reading this, I was like, Alex, why are you making these poor decisions? Why are you making these poor decisions? Just go home. But it's all part of the fun, and it's just all part of the thing. Honestly, I don't even know what the theme of this book is, really. Like, I mean, I think my mind's a little fried at the moment. If I really thought about it, I'd probably be able to come up with something. But like this book, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter about the theme. Just be lulled by like what's going on in here. And I also find it's very elegantly written as well. Love it. This was just really, really good. A huge surprise. Love the cover. Can honestly say I love what's in between the cover now. And yeah, this was just, it was wild, but like beautiful at the same time. So yeah, that is The Guest by Emma Cline. Next book we're getting into, I see the video is like really, really long, but I actually think I'm on a roll and I'm actually doing pretty good. So I think I'm doing okay. So the next one we're gonna say is, I don't know if that's showing very well, but it's Another Day in the Death of America by Gary Younge. The kind of secondary title of the book is A Chronicle of 10 Short Lives. Okay, so this is not an uplifting book, so get ready. This book is Gary Younge decided to Okay, so this is a nonfiction book. I should start off with that. And Gary Younge is a journalist. I should also start off with that. So Gary Younge has decided that he was going to choose a random day in US history and see how many children and or teenagers died on that particular day. And then he would explore, who died on that day, but they died by gun violence. So that's the premise, is like, how many children or teenagers died by gun violence on this particular day? Just chose a random day. And then he would explore about who these people were, what the circumstances was, socioeconomic circumstances, like what was going on in their personal lives, like the community they lived in, the neighborhood, all sorts of different stuff. And also describe like the crime itself, like why did they die of gun violence? Like what were the circumstances? And then kind of describe in a way too, like what that did to their family or their community, or maybe even like the world as a whole kind of thing. Now, the fascinating part and the downer in a way too is that these 10 people's lives were not global, national, or anything like that news. So it wasn't like, splashed out there for everybody to know. So they're basically forgotten souls. I mean, they're not forgotten by the people who were close to them in their lives and stuff like that, but like on a grand scale, they were not talked about. So he didn't choose like any sensationalized, murders by gun violence. So yeah, there's a lot like really going on in this, and it tackles like so many different subjects, like the NRA and like activists who are trying to put a stop to this, showing you like politicians in the government and whatever who refuse to do anything like about gun control and all sorts of different stuff. Talks about race as well, disproportionately, like how many black people were there versus white and this and that, and like all sorts of different circumstances. And another interesting thing, and I feel like you should read the introduction to this book. I know some people pick up these books and they don't read the introduction, but it's really eye-opening if you read the introduction, because he also mentions that of course, there were suicides also on that day, but he did not include the suicides, and he explains to you like why he didn't include suicides as part of the in this particular case, the 10 young lives that were lost due to gun violence. But yeah, so he explains it. And also another interesting element is that Gary Younge is Black and also from the UK. He's British. And that adds a different element to the book as well, because there are some moments too where he sort of compares the culture like in Britain versus like American culture and this American obsession with guns, and like it's depicted a lot like in movies, and it's just part of the culture, so yeah, it's a very, very, very fascinating book. Made me cry at times, especially the first one is just so sad, because like each chapter is about each child, and the first one, like right off the bat, like it's hard to take. I cannot imagine, like, if you're a parent reading this, I think it's gonna be very hard. Younge does not he puts himself in the book in ways to sort of describe maybe like his viewpoint, or like, his background and stuff like that, but he doesn't insert himself in the book like trying to give like an opinion or a particular thesis, like this is how it should be and stuff like that. So it's refreshing, and it's good that he took a step back and he's just presenting it to you, whether you come up with your own conclusions of what you think like after reading about this. The thing is, I gave this 4 stars. For me, I do feel like maybe he was trying to tackle a little too much. That's number 1. Number 2, like after reading about like 10 different people of this, it is very, very heavy. And I love my bleak reads. I tend to go towards books that are darker and stuff, but it can be a bit heavy on your soul after a while. So there's that. The last thing I'm just going to mention on this book is that the very heartbreaking, interesting, and tragic takeaway that you can get from this book is that basically Younge could have chosen any other day in American history and we would have gotten the same book. We would have gotten a completely different book. right? But tragically, we would have also gotten the same book. And really think about that. And when you really think about it, it makes you want to cry, because basically every day there's tons of children and teenagers who die by gun violence. So it just would have been a different book if you chose a different date, and we would just have a different bunch of characters, different circumstances to why they died from gun violence and all sorts of different things. But ultimately it would have been the same, because it still would have been a large number, maybe less, maybe more, and with the same kind of impact, like, wake up, America, you need to do something about gun control. Like, you need to do something about this. And maybe if you made different changes in the law and like try to keep this under control, a lot of lives wouldn't have to be lost. So that is Another Day in the Death of America by Gary Younge. I highly recommend this book. Next book we're going to talk about is Jazz by Toni Morrison. Hallelujah, I finished this book. I have tried to read this book 3, 4, or 5 times. Really, I've lost count. I love Toni Morrison, but I will go on the record and say that I could never get into this book. I don't know what worked this time, but suddenly I was really into it. I remember, I think I had finished around the page either 70 something or 80 something. I'd had a bookmark in here for years because I could never get past that stage. And finally, this time I was like, okay, yeah, I always remember that the first couple of chapters I was really into, but then it started to like taper off for me, and like, you know, I wasn't really feeling it. But this time, like a breeze, it was amazing. So yeah, I gave this, I think, oh no, actually I gave this 5 stars because it was really, really good. I think I'm still in the mindset of like, you didn't like this book before, but no, I really did like this. So this book is about a couple, Joe and Violet. Joe was having an affair with this teenage girl, Dorcas, is that what her name was? I think it was. And anyway, he ends up shooting and killing her. And he then starts like crying and grieving in these weird kind of ways. I mean, you shot the girl, but you know, he's grieving about it. And then Violet takes the picture, like there's a photo of this girl and she puts it up on their mantelpiece. So at times, Joe and Violet will both look at this picture of Dorcas and have different thoughts about it. But what makes this book really special, and then there are things like where it goes like, you know, back and forth in the past, sort of future, sort of all sorts of different things. It's very, very fascinating. But what is really like fascinating about this book is that the way that the book is written, now a lot of people have told me, you know, like read it like as if it's emulating jazz, like the music jazz. And I did take that to heart, and like maybe that helped with why I love the book. But the book has like a very cool rhythm because it goes like back and forth and then tangents, but then comes back full circle and does like all sorts of these stylistic tricks over and over and over again, where sometimes you're reading it and you don't even realize that you're reading about like the beginnings of before Dorcas got shot, because it like kind of like sort of soothes you in a way until you realize like, oh, whoa, we're here. And then it like brings you back and like brings you back to like how the beginning of the book started. And there's all these like different maneuvering. It's like, you know, musical notes. It's like bringing you back to the chorus, I guess you could say, or the hook. So yeah, it's a very fascinating book. It is very musical, and now like I totally get that now. Like I totally get that description. So yeah, so there is like, you know, and then it like goes back in the past, like in the deep past, you know, of like their parents and their family, or how Joe and Violet met. But the thing is with this book, and I mentioned this with other books today, but like this might be the one that really does have a lot of vivid imagery and like descriptions. There is a section, and I did put this up in my Bookstagram, of where it's describing a train ride. It's describing when Joe and Violet first come to the city. That's what it's called, the city. And I was just like, this is such a gorgeous way of describing something as mundane as a train ride. Like only Toni Morrison could have written it that way, because it's just so musical, and you're just like the next time I go on a train, I'm gonna have to like think of it this way. Another thing too is that, and I remember like I want to be doing more readings from books and stuff like that. I'm contemplating reading a passage of like when it describes the city. It describes like where Joe and Violet live. And there's like this, I think it's 2 pages or 3 pages of like the city, just a description of the city, and the way that it's described is just so melodic and so lyrical, and just like, I could never think of that, or I wish I was just half the writer you were, Miss Morrison. And yeah, it's a gorgeous piece of writing. I really was like, I don't know, I was feasting. It was just really, really great. And it's kind of making me wonder now, like, what was it about this book that I didn't like in the first place? Because I just totally don't get that now. But yeah, Jazz by Toni Morrison, excellent book. I wouldn't say it's the big four, and the big four I call Song of Solomon, which is my favorite book of all time. Not just by Toni Morrison, but like of all time. Song of Solomon, Sula, Beloved, which is in my top 10, and The Bluest Eye. I don't think it quite reaches those heights. Maybe above The Bluest Eye. I don't know. And then the other book that I read was Love, and no, it doesn't come. It like, this is better than Love. But yeah, I don't think it comes closer. It doesn't reach the top, the big four is what I call them. But it is solid. It is beautiful. And this is the first book. This is the last book I think she wrote before she had won the Nobel Prize. So yeah, what a high this author has. Oh my God, it's just amazing. Anyway, so yeah, give Jazz by Toni Morrison a go. It's just beautiful. If you're looking for some like really beautiful language and some really striking imagery, you can't go wrong with this, you know? And if you can find a way to get your hands on this cover, like, come on, seriously. We got 2 more people. Oh my God. Okay, so next book I want to talk about is The Maniac by Benjamín Labatut. I don't really know how you pronounce his last name, but you know, and it could be Benjamín, I don't know. So I'll hit the first name, I mean. So yeah, The Maniac. This was just, oh my God. So if you know me, you know I love When We Cease to Understand the World, okay? That book to me was just so amazing, and I'm still upset it did not win the International Booker Prize when it was up for it. This book is unique in the sense that it is written in English. It's not written in Spanish like the other book was. So I was very curious to see, like, you know, how he would be writing in the English language. Well, let me tell you, he's really, really good. I will say that this book is not as stylistically ambitious as When We Cease the World. Like, when you read When We Cease the World, one of the things that really like is a big showcase there is the writing. It just has like a fever dream type of writing. This does not have that, but it is still unique in the way that it's written. So in this book, the main element of this book is about John von Neumann, who was this mathematician, a genius mathematician, who was always looking for ways to kind of elevate that craft of mathematics, like try to understand a lot more and try to push the boundaries. So you learn like when he was a child and stuff like that, he loved taking things apart and all that and trying to solve things and stuff like that. His mind is always in overdrive. So this is, so we have John von Neumann who we follow, but the interesting part about this book, or the interesting way that it's told, is that you don't really ever get in von Neumann's head. It's all from the perspective of all the people that knew him, whether it is the people like his spouses, whether it's like close friends, whether it's his siblings, whether it's his colleagues or coworkers or fellow mathematicians or fellow geniuses who knew a little bit about him, or people who dipped in and out of his life. So I love books like that. Like, I love books like that where you can get a full understanding of a character, but never once being in that character's head and learning about it through other people. And I feel in a way that was a very smart way to do this as well, because von Neumann dips his hand into a lot of like controversial things and he makes a lot of terrifying choices. He has like a big dip in like creating like the atomic bomb and all the like nuclear bombs and stuff like that. Like, he was involved in a lot of stuff that it's horrifying, let's be real. So by having these different characters kind of like talk about Von Neumann and explain like his eccentricities and his compassion and like his genius and like some of his not so great behaviors and all sorts of different stuff too as well. Gives you a very well-rounded view of this character, but also like it gives you some much needed empathy as well. I think that was very much needed. As much as I love my books about like some really horrific people or villains or whoever, it's nice like to have that, but then also have like the empathy involved as well to sort of, you know, make you care a bit to learn about a lot more about this character. Really, really, really good. A part of this too is I say that this would make a real great companion piece to the film Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. And strangely enough, Von Neumann is not in that movie as far as I can tell. What's up with that, Nolan? But yeah, because Von Neumann had like a very big part of that. But yeah, really, really fascinating book. There's a lot of quotable things in this book as well. Like you will want to underline from this book like quite a lot. The first chapter in this book doesn't even deal with Von Neumann. It deals with like another mathematician. I can't remember his name right now. And it's just so, it's like so heartbreaking and horrific and like right off the bat, very first line of it is like, I can't remember what that mathematician's name is, but like he kills himself and he kills his son. And it's just right off the bat, you're like, oh my God, like, you know, and then we go into like a whole story and bring you back full circle of like why he did that. And, you know, what his connection is in a way to Von Neumann. And then you read about Von Neumann in like a greater way. And then the last part of this book is talking about something else as well that deals with a lot of like AI and things that hit a bit too close to home and the society that we're living in now. You're just going to be like, oh my God, your eyes are going to like open up super wide and stuff. Yeah, this book had everything going for it. I love it, love it, love it. It was beautifully written. I really don't have like any bad thing to say about it. The only thing, like I say, is that if you're expecting another like When We Cease to Understand the World, where the writing was just biting and it was just like going on this fever dream like tangent and you're feeling like it's so hard to keep up, that isn't in this book. It doesn't have it like that. This is a lot more straightforward. But yeah, it's an honestly great book. And I had like a thought in my head and all of a sudden I can't remember what I was gonna say. And I know it was gonna be good, but I honestly can't remember what it was I was going to mention about the book. But yeah, it's a dynamite book. So please give this a go. Like it is definitely worth your time. And yeah, like yeah, straight up love this one. Great stuff. Lastly, we're going to talk about is, oh my goodness, it is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Let me tell you, okay, I was so intimidated by this book. First, do I really need to say why? Second of all, it's Charles Dickens. I have read A Christmas Carol and Oliver Twist, and both of those books I didn't like absolutely like jump for joy. I did not love them. I did like A Christmas Carol a little bit more. Oliver Twist was really not something that I was like that into. So for me, reading this book was a challenge. You know, it was something that I was just like, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this. And the reason I really picked this up, or at least the reason why I decided to read this at this time, was because this book was the inspiration for Demon Copperhead, which is a book that I wanted to read. At the time, I thought it might possibly reach the Booker long list. And since I was planning to read the entire Booker long list, I was like, you know what? Better get my act together and read this first. I know you don't have to read this book in order to read Demon Copperhead, but I just wanted to. I wanted to see, like, you know, what was the inspiration, and see, does that make me like Demon Copperhead a lot more, appreciate it more, or maybe appreciate it less? I don't really know. So yeah, so that was the reason why I decided to pick this up now. The other thing too is if it wasn't for Demon Copperhead, if I had decided to read David Copperfield, like another David Copperfield book, I don't think I would have went for this one. I might have went for like Great Expectations or Bleak House or something. So that's another thing that like I have to thank Demon Copperhead for bringing this book into my life, because if it wasn't for that, who knows if I would have ever read it. So I have to say, like, I adore this. So basically, I'm just gonna give you like a little gist of it. Like, I'm not gonna go in any depth of like the description, the synopsis of the book. You're basically be reading about David Copperfield. You read about him like as a child, and then you read as he grows up. He has a mother, like a single mother, who, you know, they have like an interesting relationship. It goes off well and stuff like that, but then she ends up meeting this man, and he's really a bad seed. And he's basically takes control of the mother's life, and then sends David off to boarding school, and then it goes from there. You meet like all these different characters like along the way, and then like you slowly progress and get to his adult life. So yeah, it is really, really good. The thing is, I will say that one of the biggest shocks to me, first of all, is how easy this is to read. He doesn't take away from the gorgeous language, the gorgeous sentences, the gorgeous imagery, or anything like that, but it is surprisingly very simple to read. And you just like glide along. It makes you read like a lot faster, and you feel like, I can't wait to pick this book up. Especially like in his childhood years, that they were just so special. And the thing is, that's another shock to me, is just how funny this book was. There's so much comedy in it. There's so much comedy and comedic characters in it. I mean, there are some real dark characters in it as well. But I think I was expecting something to just be bleak all the time, and it wasn't like that. It's smart, it's funny, comedic, like I said, lighthearted at times too, and balances off with when the really heavy things happen as well. You know, so one moment you're laughing, another moment you're crying, and it just keeps doing that. There's just a very good balance. I really this book was just everything to me. Like, I really don't know how else to describe it, except like if I just want to like be gushing and just say like, read it, it's amazing. Just listen to me, guys. But seriously, it is so good. Absolutely loved it. After a while, I took my time with it. I think the only like down part in this book is there's a character named, what's her name? Dora, is it? Oh God, I can't believe I can't remember that. I read too many books at the same time. So, you know, sometimes things aren't gonna stick that way. That character was a bit like I could have done without that character, or too much of that character. But other than that, the book was just beautiful. It's sweeping, it's epic. It just glides you along. It reminds you of why you love reading. There's like so many morsels in it. There's just you know, a lot to chew on. It's exquisite. And it brought a lot of joy to my life. And again, like I said, it just reminded me of like why reading's important, why we read in the first place, why we, you know, spend all our time with books. And it also reminded me, and I already knew this before, but like I do love long books. When a long book is able to do what it needs to do without like, you know, being boring or like bogging you down, or you feel like, oh my God, look at that brick, I don't want to pick that up again. When it's able to not do that and just keep you fully invested for all of these pages, you're doing something right. And this is just what I love, is like, yeah, you know, a lot of times these days too, because we're so busy and we're so this, we gravitate towards small books, you know, these small packages. But sometimes it's just like, it reminds you, like when you pick up a big book and you feel that progress and you feel accomplished when you're done, and at the end of the day you could say, I really read a great story that I was absorbed in. There's just something that like, there's nothing else in the world better than that, you know? So to me, yeah, please read David Copperfield. I am going to read Demon Copperhead, but since it didn't make the Booker long list, it'll have to wait until later on. I do plan to read it before the end of the year, but just unfortunately, it's not gonna be now. But yeah, so those are all the books that I read in July. It was a fantastic month, as you can tell. Every book was just great. But if I have to say like my faves out of the bunch, I would say it is this, The Age of Innocence, YELLOWFACE, and I think Losing the Plot. Those are the ones that, and I think there are other, no, oh my God, and the Maniac, oh my God. See, there's a lot of books that were 5 stars, but I didn't even want to do it in that way as insane, like only the 5 stars. Like, because every book that had a 5 stars, I just wanted to say like out of all of them, like which was the best of the best. But like now I'm like, I don't really know. But maybe the best of the best is this or The Age of Innocence. I guess the 2 old school books, but yeah, fantastic, fantastic month. Hopefully you got something out of this. I know this is really, really long, but if you made it to the end, love you always. Take care. Bye.